a muscle bed. You can actually feel it, and it transmits back through the rod, through your hands, and you can feel, you know, with if you're using nylon, by the time you've pulled it and the stretch, let's say you're 120 yards out, you've pulled over your muscle bed. Great, I'm fishing over the top of it. You're not. It's sprung back. You're pulling miles off it. It's just a lot more efficient, like when you're marker floating, knowing what you're fishing over with braid, and obviously because of the diameter, like Lee was saying, you can put this extreme distances. Most of the time, in most circumstances, you can put your spot and marker further than you can your main rods, which isn't a bad thing, because you know you don't want to be fishing further than where you don't know what you're fishing over. So I mean, I always use, you know, I use a 20-pound variety, have done for the last sort of year and a half, but I use, in conjunction with it, the power braid shock leader. I don't use a finger stool, just literally whip on about 4 or 5 turns onto the reel of that, straight onto the spod or the marker, onto the braid, and then you've got, you know, that takes up an awful lot of the pressure. I wouldn't actually fish the 20-pound variety straight through, because it will cut your finger. Let's say it's only 4 or 5 turns, literally. You don't have to worry where the knot is on the spool. Cast it out, and it's, you know, it goes out exactly the same as, you know, as if you're fishing the braid straight through. So
and it's going to take all the shock out of the cast. Repeated casting for
especially spodding. Like, you know, I mean, I use the same. I use like the Shimano spod rod, and I use that for my marker rod as well. So it's a 7.5 pound test rod. But yeah, so when you're whacking that, you actually lose out how firm that rod is.
Yeah.
So the initial inertia of the first cast, this will take up, you know, that will take up all the stresses and the strains that you need to. And, you know, I mean, I haven't changed mine for like a year and a half. Yeah. Never snapped off. Never, you know.
One thing we haven't mentioned as well. I mean, obviously you're using a spod and a marker rod a lot more than you're using your fishing rods.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And so line twist is not a problem with braid, is it?
No,
you know?
no.
Which is
exactly.
one. You know, if you're using mono, you'd be suffering.
Yeah, sure.
Hell of a problem with line.
Well, yeah,
twist.
I mean, I always used to use that, Lee, and you'd come in, you'd have to grab hold of the lead and watch the float go spin round and round and round. Yeah, you don't have to do that with right. braid. So, you know, from that side of it, I've never used braid as a main line.
Right.
The first time I used braid, one of my mates said, "Have a cast with that," and I was a bit anti it, like, you know, like you do. You get stuck in your ways as an angler. He forgot to tell me it was clipped up, and this is how responsive it is. I whacked it. It was clipped up about 60 yards, and it pulled the rod out of my hand. That's how responsive it is, you know. So
no, I've sold it. I mean, the first time I used it, I made a tremendous catch, and for the time, I just couldn't believe it. You could actually, when you pulled it back, your end tackle back, you could feel like a leaf hook on your hook. You know, it was so responsive. Like that. Then I gave it to a mate of mine who he tried it. He said, "I can't use this." I said, "Why?" He said, "I can feel too much." You know, and I knew what he meant. You know, you know,
whether they're mainline, spod and marker, they're definitely part of the carp fishing.
And now are more expensive, but they just don't wear out, do they?
No,
the colour might fade a little bit, but you know,
so they're real value for money as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think once you've invested, you know, you're looking at one spool for your spod and marker rod, and that you don't have to replace that for years. No. You know, ultimately we do actually look for improving things. We're looking at different profiles of the braid and colours and whatever. But that's, you know, yet again we're gonna work on that over the next year and see if we can come up with the
and also bringing the diameter of our braids down so you can get even greater distances.
At the same breaking strains. Right, this one's the split rig. You wouldn't have seen this anywhere. I've been messing around, developing different things, having a play around with all the new products I've got to play with, and I have used this one using the Hyper Silk, or you can use it with any material you want apart from a stiff material. It needs to be like a supple braid, so you can use the Hydrolink Pro if you want to take out a bit of the fluorocarbon, but just for using it in bags, PVA bags or whatever, you know, casting it out, I'm going to do it with braid. Basically, all you're going to do, take a fang twister, yet again with the in-turned eye, tie on the 5-turn grinner knot, just a nice, you know, it's probably the most secure knot you can use for a braid. Even fluorocarbon, it's quite kind to. That particular knot. Pull the knot down nice and tight, and then yet again trim off the tag end. The reason I've tied the braid on first, as you'll see now, is because I'm going to put a very long D-rig on there. If you put the stiff material through first, it's quite hard to get the braid through. So it's quite an important thing that you put the braid on first and then the D-rig afterwards, because the D-rig, because it's stiff, you can poke that through. So take off a length of the power stiff and then thread it through the back like we would. Going to do a knotless knot and hold it. And basically we're going to go round, literally, if we can get this out of the way, the braid, we're going to go round about, because this is a thicker material, about 15 times. Because what we want is a nice D that runs the whole length of the shank of the hook. You might find it easier, like with a rig tire, just to hold the hook in place, like they do with the fly fishing. Just a few more turns. I haven't actually worked out, but that's going above where the point of the hook is. Take the tag end you've been putting round the hook and actually put it through the back of the eye. I've kinked the top of that eye there, so it will go through. That's it. You've literally, as you can see there, you've got a very long D. Like I say, it's about 15 turns. And once we've secured the D in place, we'll just manoeuvre the power stiff just so it's running parallel with the hook shank. This is why I called it the split rig. So what we're going to achieve is a pop-up with a bottom bait, and they're both able to move up and down the shank of the hook. So you take the tag end, take your tiny little rings, and put 2 of these on. As you can see, now there's 2 on there. The hardest part is getting the second part, the tag end, through the eye of the hook. So what we've done is we've created quite a big D. You're going to pull that bit through, manipulate the stiff material so you've got a nice D rig that will run 3/4 of the way the length of the shank. And what we're going to do now is take the braid out of the way, fold it out of the way, and then hold these 2 together, the 2 tag ends, and then snip it off. We're going to blob these 2, but we're going to actually fuse them together so they create one blob. As you can see, it's fusing together, and we're just going to leave that one slightly rounded, and then we've got a nice D that's not going to come out. And as you can see by that, if I can split these, this is why I give it the name, the split rig. There's 2 rings on the D, and that's the clever part. So what we're going to do now is just put on a little piece of shrink tube just to take down the just to cover up the sort of unsightly knot that you've created. And it also, once I've put the bait on, you'll see why I've created that little bit of tubing, because it sits, the hook sits literally, if you consider my finger to be the boilie, it sits like that, away, so the bottom bait sits away from the angle of the shrink tube. So we'll tie off a little piece of shrink tube, cut off a little piece of shrink tube rather, just over 3/4 of an inch. Thread it down and then actually poke it so it's completely over the blob knot. That's it, there. And then we're ready for shrinking again. That's kind of the finished rig before I tie the baits on, and you'll see why. The bottom bait holds the pop-up down, and you've got a split rig that sits absolutely beautifully. And when you hold it up, it actually is quite funny. The baits sit either side of the hook, but it still flips and turns. When a carp comes across a bait, you know, a single hook bait, if you've got 2 baits there, a bottom bait and a pop-up, it's something he's never seen before, especially with a gap between the 2. Inquisitive, they're going to take it. I used it at Frimley and caught straight away on it. Right, so once we've actually secured the shrink tube over the blob of the knot, we're just going to steam it And you want that kind of angle that you can see there, because the bottom bait's going to sit on this side of it. So we need it away, yet again, using the pliers. Get the shrink tube to melt first. Or shrink down, I should say, not melt. And just hold it like that. Just in that sort of position. So you've got quite an aggressive angle, and just let the shrink tube. Oh, that's nice and stiff now. That's fine. And then put on the baits. Doesn't matter which order you put them on. I've tied up 2 baits already here. There's a pop-up, accelerate pop-up, accelerate bottom bait. Like I say, it doesn't matter which one you put it on, but you've just got to separate the rings, and it's always the bottom bait on the bottom ring. That's the hardest part. Look, they're stuck together, that's it. So we're going to secure this one, the bottom bait, onto the bottom ring, tie it up right up to the ring as close as you can get it. I always do 2 knots, just so you're secure, but just for showing this and time wise, we'll just put 1 knot in there. But you can put, you know, it is more secure with two knots. Just blob down the dental floss. So that's the bottom bait secured. Take your pop up, tie that one on right up against the ring again. Blobbing process again, just blobbing the tag end. That'll just stop it from coming undone. So it's just a very unusual rig. And the hook, because of the D, the hook protrudes out. So if the fish are lipping it, you've got a very good chance that that's going to lip over the hook anyway. But it will sit down like that, and it's just a very, very unusual rig. And if I show you it as it sits like that, you'll see that it sits sort of one above the other, and you still get. You see how quick that went? You're still getting the flip and turn on it. So pretty important on a carp rig that you've got that flip and turn. As you can see, the baits are sort of side by side. I kind of won't explain what they look like, but I'm sure you've got your own imaginations. And that's the rig. The only other little thing I do with this particular rig, is where it sits on the bottom, is just put a tiny piece of putty onto the hook link, just so it sits down like that. So it's not, it's not going to alarm the wariest of carp. So you've got a little tiny piece, putty, at the smallest amount, just to pin the hook link down. And if you use that in a PVA bag, it's ideal. It absolutely sits perfectly. They don't even have to take the bottom bait in. If they're just going to go for the pop-up, they're still going to get the hook in the mouth. But if they're, greedy, or you want to use, the beauty with this rig is that you can use 2 pieces of corn, secure it with a boilie, or you can use a tiger nut with 2 pieces of corn. The variants are, they're massive. Whatever baits you want to use, as long as you've got a pop-up and a bottom bait, it's a well usable rig that they haven't seen before, especially with this gap in there. They're gonna take the whole lot up. That's the general, and if you balance it, you get a decent sort of pop up, and it's a critically balanced rig. That's a hell of a mouthful for a carp to deal with. And like I say, I've used it, and it's caught straight away. And like I say, the flip and turn, it's just something that I've been playing around with back from the old sort of, the bent hook rig from all those years ago. And it's just sort of developing it a little bit further, making it a bit more modern. And I think if you took your time to tie that rig, you'll see the difference that will make over a single hook bait. Because carp, double baits are, they are the way forward on some days. When you can't get a bite on a single hook bait, try a double and you'll notice the difference. It's these little things that you tweak that turn an unsuccessful day into a successful day, and this rig is one of them. So have fun tying that one. Okay, this rig, it's up in the stakes a little. It's a rig I've been playing around with for the last sort of couple of years. Elastic has been used in carp rigs for many, many years. I remember using it back in the late 80s at Withy, just literally whipping on some pole elastic onto a braided rig. You could put it and place it, but casting it was a bit of a pain. But this one is just using silicone tubing tied in with Ultima's Hyper Silk. If I pull that off, I'll show you how easy this one is to, because people think, oh, well, it's irresponsible fishing just silicone as a carp rig. It's actually not. It's quite clever. It's got double the length of hook link material, like a braid, inside. So all you're doing, once you've tied the rig, is you're sliding the silicone up to the swivel, and silicone being quite a usable product, it will slip over the little swivel end, and then we've got an elasticated rig. A lot of anglers are on the chod rig. There's no doubt in the chod rig works. If you don't get it right, you lose a lot of fish. There's no movement in the rig, and I think the chod rig, there's quite a few fish you'd never catch on it that would go nowhere near it because they're sucking from a distance. The rig doesn't come to them. You're not going to catch them. So this one just gives you that element of travel, and it's also quite clever. Once it's hooked, as you can see, using the elastic principle again, the point is in my finger and it won't let go. As soon as you start moving a few millimetres, the rig's done its job. As you can see, that's pulled the hook completely home. The carp's not going to get rid of that. They're going to run, and success rate, you will up your success rate. All I'm using, Hyper Silk, the Power Stiff on the choddy end, but you don't have to use a chod type setup. The main part of this rig is the boom. If you want to use, normal fluorocarbon, normal braid, you want to put it in a PVA bag, you can shorten the boom. It's very adaptable. You're not using normal swivels. I'm using the Nash micro swivel and the micro swivel rig rings. Cut off a decent sort of length, Hyper Silk braid, and tie it onto the actual swivel eye, not the ring eye. Tied on. I use a 5-turn grinner knot normally, but this is not going to come under that much strain when you're playing the fish, because the silicone will take a lot of the strain anyway. A length of Hyper Silk with the swivel tied to it, and then we're going to take the silicone. This is 0.75 silicone tubing, cut off about 3 inches, and then give it a little stretch, just so you're stretching out a little bit of the silicone's memory and making it a little bit thinner. Well, it's a very strong product, so you can give it a good stretch. And then what you're going to do is just blow a little bit of wet down it, down through the centre of the tubing, just so you can get the splicing needle. You can get the tubing over the splicing needle nice and easy. If you haven't blown down it and made it wet, as you can imagine, rubber sticks to it and it's very difficult. So all I'm doing is threading, as you can see there, I've threaded down the silicone onto the splicing needle, and that's the whole sort of 3.5 inches onto probably 1.5 inches. Take your end of the braid and then just literally start to feed the silicone on. And that's it. So you can drop your baiting needle, put the silicone over the eye of the swivel. So we ended up like that. And what we're basically going to do now is just cut off double the length of the silicone where the braid is, and just a little bit more for the knot. So the silicone's probably 3.5 inches. We're going to cut it off about 9 inches, the braid. If you've tied your rig already, let's say you've tied your little choddy, all you've then got to do is tie on your ring swivel. You can make those up at home, tie that on, and then all you're doing is literally squeezing that over, so you've got your elasticated part. But this one, where we're constructing it from new, we're doing it from start to finish, so I've got to show you how to put on the ring swivel as well. Same again, 5-turn grinner knot. I'm trying to hurry along here because this rig is quite in depth, but once you've done a few, you can actually you probably tie these up in about 3 minutes. And believe me, they're definitely worth constructing a few, because you'll see the results. I remember using this one on a feature down at St John's on the linear complex, and I was fishing underneath this bush, and the fish were definitely getting away with it, and they were really cagey. There was about 50 anglers on. It was absolutely packed out. And I put this rig on underneath this bush with a real heavy lead, and ended up with 5 fish for the weekend on this feature. As you can see, I'm just squeezing that along now, and that's as simple as that. So you've now got a very effective carp boom. Nice and stretchy. You'll never ever be able to snap the silicone because the braid's stopping it from going, you know, if it had no braid inside it, it would snap eventually. So that's the first part constructed. Very simple, very easy, and really, really effective. And I think that's going to be here for a long time in carp fishing. I think people are going to use that for all types of different variants of rigs. Like I say, you can use it in a PVA bag or whatever. The next part, just showing you the next stage on. Most of you know how to tie a choddy. We're using power stiff on this one, 22 pound. Cut off a length of power stiff, take your hook, and all you're going to need for this is a little tiny ring. All we're doing, threading the power stiff through the back of the eye, leaving a little tail about so long, and then just start whipping it round. I normally do seven turns, as you can see there. Done 7 turns, and then take the tag end and put it back through the opposite way of the eye that you first started putting the power stiff through. And you've just got a knotless knot. It's as simple as that at the moment. And then all you're going to do, take your ring and put it onto the end up where the bend of the hook is. Take that tag end and put it through, back through the eye. It's the beauty of this power stiff. It's so thin, even in 22. I mean, that's a small hook, and I've got that through with ease. So that's one of the benefits of this particular material, is that it's so manageable. All you do is cut that off. As you can see there, I'm a little disorganised on this one. I normally have everything here to hand, but so you've cut that off, and then all we're going to do, take the long part out and then blob it. We're just going to put a blob on there and then blob, just so it doesn't pull back through. So you've got a nice little D, as you can see, ready to go on the boom. So we've got quite a length there. You probably have cut off a little bit too much. And all we're going to do now is put this on to your ring about there. You can either do it figure of 8, like so, tied on figure of 8, or I'll show you another little knot that I've been using, which has been quite effective. If you put in a granny knot into the power stiff, depends where you want it, quite a small granny knot,